Now, there are reports that Met Police Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley has been summoned by the Prime Minister to Downing Street. It's after he yesterday claimed he did not have the power to ban pro-Palestine protests on Armistice Day.
Well, according to police, a ban can only be introduced if intelligence suggests a serious threat of disorder. This comes as Veterans Affairs Minister Johnny Mercer has urged ex-service personnel to avoid counter-protests against Palestinian activists, and as far-right extremists are reportedly planning to protect London's landmarks.
Meanwhile, thousands more people have fled northern Gaza for the south as the Israeli Defense Minister claims Israeli forces have broken into the heart of Gaza City. Joining us now is Dr. David Lowe, former police and former counter-terrorist detective, who is now a lecturer in crime and security. David, let me ask you about Sir Mark Rowley. He's currently, we're hearing, in Downing Street, having been summoned there by the Prime Minister. And I think the Prime Minister will be saying to him something like, look, you're the head of the police. This is your call. Can this pro-Palestine march on Armistice Day go ahead or not? Is there a threat to public safety? That is your call. You tell us there is, we'll back you in calling off this march. It is down to Rowley, and it strikes me, David, that Rowley is a professional buck passer. When he sees people break the law, he asks the government for clarity. So when they call for holy war and jihad at these marches, that's a call to violence, that's against the law. When Just Stop Oil glue themselves to motorways and things like that, that's against the law. Mark Rowley says, oh, well, I need clarity. This guy needs to sort of work out what his job is, doesn't he? And to start being a policeman and to start policing this country. It is his call, is it not, on Saturday?
Yeah, good afternoon, Alex, and good afternoon, Kevin. I heard you call for some clarification of the law, and I'll try my best to give that, because what we're looking at here is the Public Order Act 1986, processions. Now, the organisers have to give notice within 6 days of a procession. The Chief Officer of Police will then look at the route they're using. They will also look at issues, as you mentioned there. Is there potential for disorder? Are we looking at public safety, etc.? Those conditions are laid down in the statutes. And of course, this echoes Article 11 of the Convention of Human Rights. It's the right to peaceful assembly. Now, notice that, peaceful assembly. Now, if they think, now in Mark Rowley's case, if he thinks there's going to be some form of serious disorder, disruption, potential safety to the public, then he can, not for a period not exceeding 3 months, ban that march, and that will be done in council with, in his case, the Home Secretary, Sir Oliver Braverman. Hopefully that's what they're discussing now. But I think you're right, Kevin. We look at issues that have happened over the last few days with war memorials around the country. We've seen a poppy seller who's been attacked by some pro-Palestinian protesters. There is that suggestion that, and as you said, I mean, I know Tommy Robinson has been on YouTube for a call to arms to protect the cenotaph. Now, if you've got the far right there, I'm not saying it's extreme far right, they're the neo-Nazis, but if you've got the far right there and you've got the Palestinian groups, I don't think it would take much to realise there's going to be some form of serious disorder that will take place. I mean, so it's in the hands.
I was going to say, is it not the case, though, that, and Kevin's made this point repeatedly, that people have not been punished, or there's been nothing visible done when people on the streets have been shouting jihad, people have been waving flags that to some of us may seem quite provocative, you know, black flags with white Arabic writing, we don't know what it says, but we can only assume it's something reflecting something bad, and that then what happens is you end up with those people who really you don't want taking over peaceful demonstrations to protect the cenotaph and protect our monuments, getting themselves involved. And it's only then that the police step in when they think there's going to be a head-to-head, when, frankly, they should have potentially stopped the sort of overreactive hyperbole of some of the people on these marches in the first place.
Yeah, and I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Alex. The organisers will, I mean, they've said they're going to avoid Whitehall, but they can't account for every person who's going to be attending that procession. There will be breakaway. No doubt there will be those who will break away. And as you said, they're going to cause the problem. One of the issues we have seen in the past where they have been very careful, certainly in London. The Metropolitan Police have made arrests after the event. You've got to be very careful going in to arrest someone who may be in the centre of a crowd, because then that violence could escalate, and that will put more people's lives, including the police officers, their safety at risk. But you're quite right. Let's try and prevent this from happening in the first place. It's only my personal view. I think there's sufficient grounds there to stop this procession on Saturday, and if they want to, on Sunday as well, when the service is being held at the Cenotaph, and then allow, because it's an important right, is right to peaceful assembly and the right to freedom of expression, is Article 10. It's right to have that. And we talk about jihad. When he was asking for clarification, there's two forms of jihad. The greater jihad, which is self-reflection, looking at yourself as a person, and improving yourself as an individual in society. But the one we know they're referring to is the lesser jihad. As you said, Kevin, it's a call for holy war. And it's a holy war, and it's very anti-Semitic, a lot of these chants. And they should get it right. Is it Zionism they're after, which is the formation of an Israeli state, or are they attacking Judaism, the faith itself? And we've got to get that right, because that's a concern, in the anti-Semitism that's coming out from these individuals.
Yeah, personally, David, I feel that these marches on Armistice Day should be allowed to go ahead, because you can't have a bit of a right to protest. It's a bit like being a bit pregnant. It can't happen. Now, I'm against these marches. I think they're disrespectful. But I believe in the right to protest, so you can't say, well, you got the right to protest, but not now and not on that day and not when they're doing this. So what I'm thinking here, you tell me what you would do as a top copper right now, is it's not about respect. I'm afraid they should show respect, but they might not. It's about the threat to public safety, isn't it? So given that Tommy Robinson and the gang and lots of other elements are calling for, a call to arms to protect the Cenotaph, and the pro-Palestinians will be out, it's a very sort of incendiary mix. If you were Sir Mark Rowley, given what I've just said, would you be banning this march?
Well, if I was on Sir Mark Rowley's salary, I really would have a good think about it.
Well, I imagine you are on his salary. What would you do?
Okay. What I would look at, certainly for this weekend, is if I spoke with the organisers of these demonstrations and they gave a cast iron guarantee that the vast majority of those will be marching away, say they went to another part of Greater London or the London area and avoided it, and they gave those guarantees, I would then allow that to happen, but I would also then ensure I would have my police support units with sufficient protective equipment around the Whitehall area, and basically just stop any form of potential protest, be it the far right or be it pro-Palestinian or those who are on that fringe where they're more radical. I would prevent them from going into Whitehall. It's a major operation, and he can ask for mutual support from surrounding forces. And an example was the Queen's funeral. It wasn't just the Met. There were police forces from all around the country helped to police that. And this is a serious issue. Remembrance Sunday and Remembrance on the 11th. It's a sacrosanct part of our culture. We're there to remember those who've given their lives for the freedoms of this country, the freedoms that these protesters are enjoying. And I think that's what I would do if I was Mark Rowley. If they gave that cast iron, allow it, but I would close off Whitehall and the area around the Cenotaph.
Now, thankfully, we haven't seen anything as much as or as dangerous or as horrific as a terrorist attack on our soil since the outbreak of war in Gaza. But as a former counter-terrorism detective, I'd like to ask you, with the information that we got today that calls to helplines reporting significant risks of terrorism, I think 50 to 200 are believed to be pretty credible, and those were reported in October. How able are the police to deal with upticks in terrorism that might come about as a result of what's going on in the Middle East?
Well, there will be work going on. Trust me that they will be gathering as much evidence. The one key offence that they'll look at is under the 2006 Act of Planning and Preparing Acts of Terrorism. That's been a very useful offence when it was introduced, because it's helped counter-terrorism officers and our security service working together to prevent attacks from happening. Of course, you can never have a 100% guarantee, but I'm talking about that, Alex, with terrorism legislation. Any individual at these marches who professes membership of Hamas, support for Hamas, they're committing an offence under the Terrorism Act 2000. And, that is a serious offence. It carries a penalty of up to 14 years. So there are those areas of the terrorism legislation that be used, not just the hate crime under the Public Order Act. But yeah, I think looking at the potential for terrorist attacks, because we can see it, synagogues potentially being targeted, government buildings, because the government's stance is basically they're standing by Israel and they're not standing by Palestine. Of course, this is where Keir Starmer's having a problem within his own party, as he's trying to say, well, I'm not totally for a total ceasefire, but you can see how divisive this issue is with individuals. It is polarizing views, and we're not getting that middle ground of understanding and compromise. And I think that's the problem we've got with this issue at the moment, politically.
Let me ask you the last question, David, as a former copper. Now, I understand Rowley's instinct and other police chiefs around the country not to inflame the situation with these marches. You got 70, 100,000 people marching through central London. If the cops go in there arresting left, right and centre, it could cause all sorts of problems, and that's obvious. However, surely there must be a point where the police say, well, there is a certain amount of law breaking we cannot allow under any circumstance. So lots and lots of law breaking is going on in these marches. They are calling for jihad. Even those, the river to the sea, when will Palestine be free? That is a call for the annihilation of the Jewish state. All these calls are a call to violence. They're against the law. What is the point of the police force if they just stand back and let people break the law? Do you think they've been too standoffish so far? Should they get in and stop at least the jihad chances?
Yeah, I think there's a certain chance. I think from the river to the sea, let Palestine be free. I've argued on its own. I look at the history of it as well, from the British, when there was a British protectorate. If you looked at that map of what was then Palestine, it wasn't a proper state. It's the map of Israel. And the issues the British had in trying to compromise between the two parties, the Palestinians and the Israelis or the Jews who were moving into Israel at the time. But it's a call for a liberation of Palestine. But I think if you add comments, sort of annihilate all Israelis, all Jews, to achieve that, you've really crossed the line as regards hate speech into there. And you're quite right. These are issues where it's got to be policed sensitively. But if you're calling for the jihad, and I just said before, we know which jihad they're talking about, a holy war.
Of course.
Then that's got to be dealt with, and it's got to be dealt with firmly but fairly.
Yeah, thank you, David Lowe. I couldn't agree more. It's not like these people, when they're saying jihad, are actually saying, oh, it's my internal struggle, is it? They know they're being provocative. That's what I kept saying.
So you hear them go, what do we want? Jihad. When do we want it? Now. So if you interpret that they go, what do we want? We want internal struggle so we can become better Muslims. When do we want that? Now. It's just nonsense. It's a call to holy war. Mm-hmm. And if you're watching Sir Mark Rowley, you're probably not, because you're with the Prime Minister. But if you were watching, that's against the law. How about enforcing it? Just a thought.